Hello, everyone. Welcome to World City. Very excited to be here today with Ariel Palitz, who is working at the New York City Night Department, actually acting as night mayor, Joaquim Boadas, who's the General Secretary for the International Nightlife Organization, and Mirik Milan, who was actually one of the first or the first night mayor in the world in Amsterdam, and today working through his Vibe Lab consultancy on night policy. This is an extremely hot topic and current topic today. We'll be discussing the future of nightlife, the challenges that obviously COVID is probably accelerating, and how we can create a world in the night for the future. Joaquim will be moderating this panel. So Joaquim, please go ahead.
Hello and welcome to World City. It's a pleasure for me as General Secretary of the International Nightlife Association to do as moderator here today. So first of all, I will introduce our speakers. Okay, Mirik Milan is the global night mayor and former night mayor of the Netherlands and Amsterdam. Okay, so Mirik, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Joaquim, and thank you for World Cities Festival to invite us here to speak about this very pressing issue. I actually would have said like ladies first, but maybe we swap it around. You know, like it's all about equality here. So Ariel, if you don't mind, I will just jump in first here. No, so I was a night mayor of Amsterdam for 6 years, a position I helped to create and was a direct advisor to the mayor of Amsterdam. I sometimes still have to pinch myself for it, but yeah, it actually turned into a global movement where we have now more than 50 night mayors around the world. They're all looking into nighttime governance. It's a very interesting and emerging policy field, because although we are the other 12 hours of the day, basically, the night is very an under-researched field. And definitely when we look now at this pandemic, you see how many bars and clubs and restaurants are closed because we have to socially distance, which is of course terrible. So that's definitely also what we're gonna speak about today in detail. I run a consultancy agency called Vibe Lab. Because it's a laboratory for vibes. You have to bring people together and to create a vibe to actually get something done in a city, definitely when you are dealing with such difficult topics as nighttime governance is. We do research, we do advocacy, because we always want to help other cities develop their own advocacy groups or night mayors, etc. But we also do consultancy to cities and brands that want to understand the night in a better way. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Mirik. And then on the other hand, we have Ariel Palitz. She's from the New York City Nightlife Office. Okay, if you want to introduce yourself, Ariel, please.
Sure. First of all, thank you all so much for this opportunity. This really is an important global conversation, and New York is very happy to be a part of it. My name is Ariel Palitz, and I am the Senior Executive Director of the very first Mayor's Office of Nightlife in New York City. We are housed within the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. This office was created in 2017, actually, by the mayor and Councilmember Rafael Espinal. And I was appointed in 2018. This office, of course, was inspired by the first night mayor, Mirik in Amsterdam. And I think we're all very grateful for this global night mayor movement now more than ever. Before the pandemic, this office was created to make sure that this industry is getting the respect and recognition and the support that it deserves and needs. It, as we know, historically has not been recognized for the economic engine, the cultural engine that it is. And so it was extremely important for us to be able to be in this position to make sure that nightlife is not only supported and recognized, but that it's more fair, that it's safer, more equitable, and more accessible for everyone. And I can just say now that this pandemic has occurred, I'm so grateful that we were created beforehand so that we could really establish the relationships and the foundation that is really necessary right now to be on the inside so that we can push on the inside and redefine what nightlife means and what it stands for within government, and to make sure that it is getting the attention and respect that it needs, and that nightlife has a seat at the table. And thankfully, because there is a mayor's office of nightlife in New York, it does.
Okay, great. Thank you for your presentations. Okay, yeah, the first matter I wanted to bring is the importance of nightlife in cities. What do you think? What do you think that nightlife bring to cities? What do you think that is the most important thing that they bring? Safety, attraction, quality, tourism. Which are the main things that nightlife brings to cities, in your opinion?
Ariel, will you do first and I jump in after?
I mean, sure, of course. I think now with the creations of the Office of Nightlife, we're able to equate more what nightlife is bringing to the city. Before, of course, a lot of people think, oh, it's about a good time and it's about dancing and getting together, and it is those things, but it's so much more. We know that in New York, it's a $35.1 billion industry that supports 300,000 jobs and $700 million in tax revenue that pays for the police and the schools and the garbage pickup. So for some people, they need to hear what the economic value is and how essential it is, not only to the backbone of the economy, but now to the recovery of the economy. But it's also the identity of the city that you live in, right? It is the magnet that brings people from all over the world to live and to work and to visit. And it is a safe haven for the diversity of the communities here. It's a place where people find their chosen families and find their protection. Especially within the LGBTQ community, where people come from all over the world to come to New York and to be accepted and to find love and happiness and family and to find freedom. And it's also the incubator of the underground movements and culture that define the mainstream. Everything that's cool starts in the underground, whether it be breakdancing or voguing or hip hop or jazz. I mean, nightlife is everything to everyone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and also really well spoken, Ariel. And to add on top, what I think is or what I ran into in my work, and still today, which is so difficult, is that we have the numbers. So we have the emotional arguments, and we have the cultural arguments. So nightlife is relevant from social, cultural, and economic perspective, we always say. So we have all the emotional arguments, we have all the cultural arguments, we have all the social. Well, this pandemic has showed us how important social interaction is when developing your personality, when growing up. Social interaction is key, and nightlife gives you the opportunity to be who you want to be. So we have all the social cultural arguments. We also have the economic arguments as well. You can see that, you can roughly say out of all the economic impact studies we have seen over the years that roughly 1 in 7 to 8 jobs are connected to the nighttime economy in major cities. This is from a report from London from a couple of years ago. And you see also that cities like London are very much hit by the pandemic because they are so much in the service industry is so important to them. But what is so weird, and that is the real issue, is that we have the emotional and cultural numbers, arguments, we have the economic numbers, but still we are really not seen as important as the cultural industry or as important as your, I don't want to say transportation industry, but there are so many industries that it's much easier to get funding for than it is for our industry. I think the night in general has been over the last maybe 3,000 years has always been seen as evil, as something bad, as something which you should not interact with too much. That is from a cultural standpoint. In art it has been pushed, and still this is still part of our thinking about the night. The night is something bad and nothing good happens after midnight, all these kinds of things. And that is so we're also really happy with this global nightmare movement, and now more cities are developing nighttime policies and all that stuff, but still we are not fully recognized for the impact we have on the city and on cities' identities and on the city and on the economic impact. Weirdly enough, huh? So what do we do?
Yeah, very good, very well explained. Very well explained. Okay, and about the pandemic, how do you think that it has affected the cities? Especially cities, you know. How do you think that they have been affected by this pandemic? Affecting nightlife, I mean. Okay?
Well, I mean, it really put everything to a stop, right? The way we live, where we go, what we do, everything stopped overnight. And it left us in I think for a couple months, maybe in a little bit of shock about what is actually happening and how to process it. But the fact is that this pandemic has hit the hospitality industry harder than most. It hit it right in the soul of social gathering, right? This pandemic, it manifests and festers where people gather. And hospitality and nightlife, the soul of it is about gathering. And so it's a dilemma. It's a dance floor dilemma, so to speak, where we have had no choice but to not only stop up what we're doing, but to reimagine and reevaluate what we have been doing and how we will continue once we get through this. But it's been a devastating blow. We have almost 27,000 eating and drinking establishments here in New York. We have managed to support and find lifelines for the eating and drinking establishments, restaurants with outdoor dining. We've become more European. We have a new cafe culture that has brought a beautiful vitality and restoring community. But we also know that many of the live music venues and dance clubs haven't opened since March. So we're still very much in a crisis. We're still very much in a survival mode. But, you know, the hospitality industry and the people in it are natural fighters, survivors, producers, organizers. And what we're seeing in this pause is an incredible coming together in a way that the industry has been talking about for years. Wouldn't it be great if we could have an alliance, a coalition, an organization? And I feel like this time is not being wasted. The industry is coming together very powerfully, finding their voice, finding the power in numbers that they always had, and are speaking for themselves, lobbying for themselves. In America, we have the National Independent Venue Association, which has become a political force pushing the Save Our Stages Act. We also have the restaurants, Save Restaurants Act, that are currently at the seat of federal government to pass a grant to help save our stages in live music because of this organization and the work that they're doing. And I think when we ultimately get through this, it is this type of organization of the industry that will continue and will make sure that this industry is stronger, more organized, and has a stronger voice.
Yeah, so I just a quick note on top, but still the fact is a lot of venues are closing. In Amsterdam, we lost already two of our most important nightclubs because of the pandemic. So it's really hitting the industry really hard. And what my biggest issue is that you see that there's also a lot of there's also a lot of more moralization of alcohol consumption happening, definitely now in this second wave, where in Amsterdam it's not allowed to have alcohol with you on the street after 8 p.m. It's not allowed to have cannabis on you after 8 p.m. So there's also so that's really weird. For the first time we have these kinds of restrictions, but on the other hand, out of the figures, out of the numbers, out of the new cases, hospitality is only like 3% of the new cases, and the most are just in the workplace, 20%, in hospitals also 15%, very high. But the first that get shut down are the bars, restaurants, and well, nightclubs haven't been open at all, and big gatherings. So there's also a very weird approach, and of course I think that all the measurements are really important, but still sometimes it's quite weird how certain industries are how the behavior of people is more like, also in my opinion personally, in a way as well during this pandemic.
Okay, thank you. And no, Ariel, did you want to say something else?
You know, interestingly, in New York, because of the pandemic, we were granted the allowance to do delivery and takeout of alcohol for the first time, right? Which was something that was brand new for New York and meant to be a lifeline. And so I absolutely agree with everything that Mirik is saying, because we know that hospitality is always, you know, the fall guy for a lot of things. We are also still trying within this movement here with having an Office of Nightlife. You know, this industry in the first 3 months were considered essential businesses. And that's when alcohol was able to be taken to take out and delivering, people having drinks in a different way. So there's a lot of restriction, but there's also signs of being able to recognize the value.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, after every crisis, there comes innovation. You know, of course, the platform that Lutz, my business partner and the club commissioner from Berlin started, United We Stream, which was adopted by more than 80 cities around the world, which raised more than 2 million euros for venues, for nightlife operators, for everybody in the scene, with emergency response funds to keep those venues alive. But it's really important that we have something to come back to. And I think when we look at okay, what are the solutions? For example, in the Netherlands, or one of the things that this pandemic has learned me is that we should not make too many assumptions. Every time when we make an assumption, oh, it will go in this direction, then something happens and we are being pulled back. In the Netherlands, for example, to make it a little bit current, and I wasn't part of this, but there was for very long the focus was on, okay, let's the venues want to reopen, but they wanted to do like an age discrimination, basically saying like everybody under 30 could come in and above not, because they are saying like young people are less affected, so they should have the ability to come together. I was against this approach, and you have seen also now that this approach is not working, because now the second wave is mostly coming through young people. So we also have to be honest about the fact that, of course, bringing young people together in large quantities will have the effect that the virus will spread again. So that's why I think it's very important that we now focus on the solution. So one of the solutions could be, of course, where definitely Berlin and the Netherlands is also focusing is the rapid testing. I know, Joaquim, you mentioned before that in Barcelona there's maybe also a test or a pilot being done. What I think is a very interesting approach is could we create, so what I've learned from our context, is for example in South Korea. So all the countries or all the cities that are managing quite well with this pandemic and with the virus, they really test a lot. Denmark is a great example. They really do a lot of testing, and also Korea as well. They also do a lot of testing. So in Korea, you have basically on squares, you have rapid testing stations, and I very much like this idea of like, okay, we can have a vaccine in March, maybe, but maybe it will take for 2 years. That is something we have to be realistic about. So is there maybe a possibility that we could set up, and I would like to see some pilots in that sense, is it a possibility that we set up rapid testing stations on squares, or can we create safer spaces within, let's say, a museum district that you have to pass through this testing station? And then within the confines of this area, everybody is tested, so you have a less chance of getting the virus. So because this could bring back tourism, definitely for Amsterdam, one of our lifelines in our economic system is tourism. And I think the rapid testing should be something that we should not be speaking about. We should already be doing the pilots. And I think the process is this moment of innovating and coming up with new ideas and trying something new is going way too slow.
So you think that these rapid tests should be or could be the final solution to this?
No, it's not the final solution, but it could help to make certain districts more interesting. I think what I've learned now is that there probably is not one solution. We have to do a lot of stuff. We have to the vaccine has to come and the rapid testing. So I think it's like a staggered approach. Everything has to be on top of each other to try to open up our businesses again and to get social life, because we need social interaction as people, as human beings. We need to come together and hug each other. Everybody's making jokes always. Oh yeah, what's this hugging all about? Well, it's actually like your skin hunger or something. That's what people are all about.
And what do you think, Ariel, about this?
Well, I agree that it is human nature for us to socialize, and that we will find a way to do so, and that it is urgent that we do find solutions to open up our businesses safely and to socialize safely. If we don't, people wind up doing it anyway, and doing it underground and being unregulated and perpetuating the problem perhaps. And so I think it is essential that we find a way to organize sociability and reopen our businesses as safely and as quickly as possible. In the early days of the pandemic, or actually when venues started, restaurants were allowed to open again outdoors, there was a venue in New York that tried the rapid testing in their welcoming area. It was so early in the game that there was concern and skepticism that it would create a false sense of security, and people would act irresponsibly because they felt that somehow they were safe. But I think that as the technology and the medicine and the testing becomes more reliable, or if it is, I don't even know if what is happening in Europe, but I think that it is undoubtedly essential. Testing and tracing is a new New York mantra as well as a national mantra. It is the only and best way for us to be able to know where the virus is and where it's spreading and where it isn't. And so I would be very curious and very eager to see what is happening in the other places that are testing this approach. And, you know, of course, I know Mirik is, you know, a thought leader and really is able to have that foresight and create these opportunities for testing the ideas, right? You've always been someone who has put out the original ideas and see and make them happen. And so I don't think anything is off the table. Like Mirik said, like we need multiple solutions all at the same time. In New York right now, we just reopened at 25%. We had outdoor dining, and just a couple of weeks ago, we opened at 25%. And the numbers remain low. We still have had some hot spots in some of the boroughs, and we descended upon those areas and created more restriction in those few blocks of that area rather than in the whole city to control the spread there. Those numbers have gone down, and now the restrictions are being lifted. I think one of the solutions that will be part of the reopening is to open gradually and to test and to trace and to keep opening, right? 25% now, the numbers stay low, the numbers stay good, we go to 50%. If the numbers are good and we continue with our numbers, we keep opening gradually, slowly, steadily, safely. And that has been the approach of New York so far. Of course, to Mirik's point also, we never know really what's around the corner. It's very hard to anticipate what is next in this pandemic. It's full of surprises. But I think a combination of making sure people are doing the right thing, following the these are really basic rules, right? Wash your hands frequently, wear a mask, social distance when you can, stay home if you're sick. It's not rocket science, it's just science, right? So if people can have a sense of personal responsibility as well as the businesses, and then the government reacts to the numbers and the metrics and allow us to reopen gradually, safely, testing different ways of gathering, whether even in nightclubs or live music venues, if we start with just being seated to begin, and then we slowly start to find different ways of gradually returning to the new normal.
Yeah.
I think
So
it's a generation.
So that's like, it's interesting how every country or city is on that same timeline, but somewhere else. So in the Netherlands we had, and most of Europe we had the opportunity to open up, but then seated concerts. But I think what the core of the whole thing is, and that's why we have to really start already now to think about solutions, to really start to think, to already do pilots, to think about solutions, because we will never control the hunger of young people to interact and to socialize and to come together, and they won't socially distance. I was listening to a story on the radio this morning, young kids from 15, on high schools, during the breaks, they will be close to each other, and that's also what you do as a young person, right? You break the rules. That's how life works. So what you have seen happening in Europe is that the closure of the clubs, the seated shows have led to a massive outbreak of illegal parties, illegal raves. That's the bigger and organized ones. To the point that the police, of course, couldn't control them anymore. There were just too many every weekend. And we have in the Netherlands, we almost have no illegal raves anymore, because we have such a great nightclub scene and festival scene that people don't have to go to an illegal rave anymore, because also the legislation fits the needs of young people going out. But what we have seen is that people just want to come together, and this has led, because in the second wave, all the new infections for the first couple of the first month or something were mostly done by young people. You know, it was all age under 30, like 40, 45, even higher. So 70-75% was like below 30 years old. So that spiked the second wave, and then went into hospitals, and then we were and that's why we're now in this semi-lockdown situation. But what we do need to figure out is, how do we prevent a third lockdown from happening somewhere around February, March again? Because what will happen here in Europe, in my opinion, so in 2 months' time, the numbers will be lower. People will be done with socially distancing and sitting at home. They really have to come out. We will release the restrictions, and then the whole cycle will start over again. So how do we make sure that when we open up in January, that we have something to not make the same mistake, and to make sure that we test all the young people that will come together anyway? You know, that should probably be the focus.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Okay, this was some of the questions I wanted to put, but I think that you have already answered to them. But the thing is that, do you think that these illegal parties that you were talking about, these bad behaviors of some people, irresponsible behaviors, maybe will delay the reopening of legal clubs? Do you think that it can affect
Yeah, so I don't want to say it's like irresponsible behavior of young people, because put yourself in their shoes. You know, what are you gonna do if you're 15 or 20 or 22, like in the prime of your life? Is it bad behavior? Is it irresponsible? Yeah, yes, it is in a way, but I think it's so much part of who we are. So yes, of course, it will delay it, but it will delay it, but also it might delay it. But what's more important is that basically in the whole world, we would need support for these businesses, financial support. So for example, in Berlin, clubs in nightclubs, in electronic music, have received funding to stay open. There were events organized also helped organized by governments for outdoor events, which was supported financially. In the UK also, I also understood that nightlife and electronic music, there were also some grants given out. So there's some good things happening. But for example, in the Netherlands, and this is the kickoff of Amsterdam Dance Event, which is actually was supposed to happen this week, which is the most important conference for electronic music around the world. 9,000 delegates, It attracts 90,000 foreign visitors that are visiting Amsterdam and 400,000 visitors over 5 days. Has an economic impact, direct economic impact of 40 million euros or something on the city of Amsterdam, apart from all the secondary jobs and all the events which are organized by it. And in the Netherlands, there is no support whatsoever for this music industry. 70% of our music export is electronic music, because our native tongue is maybe not so beautiful. The Dutch language is not really good, so electronic music is the biggest export we have, but we're not, and we're not. There's no funding, and there's even not really conversation happening. So there is like this class distinction between, what let's say people in government or decision-making positions think is culture, and what maybe young people perceive as their culture, and what's important for them. So it's a continuous fight. I don't think that the solution is money, but we need to make sure that there's enough interesting businesses and creative communities still open, because they will be, and that's I think how Ariel also started, they will be the vehicle to rebuild and reimagination and resilience as well.
I would just add, that we really need to remember that a lot of these clubs and venues are small businesses. These are people's livelihoods, it's their lives, it's their dreams, it's their jobs. And it is so essential also to the communities that go to them, and in the communities that they reside in. And there is a lot of suffering right now. People are not able to pay their rent. They're not able to pay their bills. This is a very basic human need problem that we have. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of depression, uncertainty, and money, and making sure and hoping that the federal government, we're obviously in the middle of an election now, to have a compassionate government that understands the value of small business and culture, and the value that it brings and the necessity to save it, is where we are right now, in this country, in this city. For whatever reason, comedy clubs, karaoke, burlesque dancing has been specifically restricted extra because of the potential risk to the virus. But we also just have dancing and live music that has tremendous, that is really banned at this point because of safety, because of the safety of the city and the country and the planet, and having financial support and relief to weather the storm, the cold, dark winter is coming. At the end of the day, what they need to be able to do is to pay their rent, right? And to pay their bills, and if necessary, hibernate safely for a few months to get through this storm, to get back to the spring, and hopefully with the medical innovations that will come, that we will be able to start to recover and return. But we need to financially secure these venues, and simultaneously find a way for people to socialize safely, right? For the young people and for the older people, people need this because their mental health is also at stake. But I think it's a very complicated situation that we all need to recognize, hopefully is temporary, but that this is a time of sacrifice that we all must make a little bit of in order to get through this together, and to be able to return strategically and safely. But in the meantime, there needs to be support, financial support, relief, rent relief, federal programs. The cities are also going bankrupt, right? So when people say, why aren't the cities paying for their rents? Why isn't the state paying, giving grants and money to the industries or to anyone? It's because just like the businesses, they're also bankrupt to a certain degree. And so, no one's on the trains, no one's on the buses, no one's buying anything. The money has stopped everywhere. So that's why we really need to focus on federal relief to be saved, so to speak. But it's very complicated. This is about global health and personal health and economic health and cultural health. And we have to take that as the paramount consideration when we are trying to find solutions. And so I think it's a combination of going slowly, going strategically, testing and tracing. When there are outbreaks, we address it in those outbreaks instead of shutting down a whole city if it can be avoided. And finding ways for people to socialize safely and with regulation to avoid them from going underground. And then we all have to understand that this is a temporary time of sacrifice that we'll need to make together so that we can ultimately come back together.
Okay, thanks. And which is your opinion? What do you think that clubs should do to attract the government's attention? That they can be helped, because you need that they can't pay their rents, they can't pay their bills. So what do you think that clubs should do in order to attract this attention from the governments?
If I might, Mirik, I think they're doing it. They're organizing. What hospitality never really did before the pandemic was recognize how powerful they were because of the numbers that they had. Their mailing lists had thousands and thousands of people. Their social media reaches thousands of people. Everyone needs to go out to eat. Most people go out to dance and drink. It's organizing the voices, becoming one voice, finding the power and the organization in their numbers, and then having everybody come together and pushing in the same direction for legislation and for funding. And I also think that now is a time, while we are on pause, to make some of the critical changes that we were pushing for before the pandemic, so that the industry is not in such a vulnerable place financially and otherwise. But what they need to do is what they're doing, and do more of it, more organizing, stronger, louder voice, speak to your local politicians and your federal politicians, and make the case, make the economic case, the cultural case, the emotional case, the spiritual case, and to try to make them imagine a world without it, because that's the last and worst thing that could happen.
Mirik?
No, I fully agree, and I don't want to echo too much because Ariel already dropped a powerful statement. What I'm missing personally in the conversations, or so to pull from an example, here in Amsterdam, there was like a demonstration planned on the Museum Square here in Amsterdam, and I expected there was a lot of support on social media, and I expected it to be very busy. But in the end, there were only like 1,500 or 2,000 industry people and people that had friends working in the industry that were at the protest. So I was a little bit, to be honest, sad to see that it's very difficult, although all these nightclubs, etc., they have these mailing lists and they have but the actual party goers, if you ask them join a demonstration and we're going to march to City Hall or something, then people always sometimes are busy with doing something else, or so that's what I thought was a bit not disappointing. There was a lot of support online, but how can we make sure that also these voices are the people that go to all these festivals? We have 900 festivals in the Netherlands for a country with 17 million people. Think about how many people that are, that are on a regular basis going, or in a regular summer going to 4 or 5 festivals. To mobilize those voices have been shown that it's actually harder than you expect. But on a positive note, I think, nightlife will never go away. We will always find a way. We are those natural organizers that Ariel said. I was party promoter myself for 15 years. And when it comes back, it will be very, very sweet.
Oh, yes. We will have a renaissance.
Exactly. The Roaring 20s. It's already the war. I would make that joke a while ago. It's already the Roaring 20s. And from probably 2022 or something, we will have a proper party.
With lessons learned.
With lessons learned.
Okay, then it was the last question, because we have talked about everything. So what do you think? Do you think that will nightlife ever be what it was before the pandemic? Like it was before, the way it was before?
I don't think anything is like the way it was before. We move forward. That is life itself. Nightlife changes. It's always changed. It's different than it was in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 20s. It will be different moving forward. It would be unfortunate if we did not come out of this maybe more humble, more grateful, and wiser. But on the other hand, to Mirik's point also, it is human nature to gather and to be together. And I think in many ways, it will be as it was since the beginning of time. Just the natural need to be together, to celebrate, to mourn, to dance, to create, to love. It's in us. It will never leave us, and we will always find a way to do it, and with lessons learned.
Mirik, what do you think?
Thank you. I think that was a beautiful closing statement.
Thank you.
Okay, then thank you very much, Ariel and Mirik, for your clear speech. Okay, so we close the Congress. Okay, and I'm very, very grateful that you have participated.